Time perhaps to change the way you feel about Vauxhall's Corsa. This 4th generation version aims to surprise in all the ways its predecessor was unremarkable. As a result, on paper at least, it's the most competitive Super Mini the brand has ever bought us. Though the Corsa Super Mini is no longer Vauxhall's smallest model, it's still the brand's biggest seller. It's still the company's most important car, and it's still vital that Vauxhall gets any freshly designed version right. Welcome to the Mark IV model. Even if you weren't a previous Corsa customer, you might well conceivably recognise this car, for the glass area and the door pillars are exactly the same as before, guaranteeing a familiar recognition carryover from a Mark III model whose history goes all the way back to 2006. Don't be deceived though. This is a fundamentally different Corsa, changed in all the areas that really matter, with the underpinnings, the engine and the technology all new. There's a much smarter cabin too, and we're promised a far better driving experience than any small Vauxhall has previously offered. In short, we're promised a far better Corsa, which is just as well given the improvements made to its competitors in recent years. Models like Peugeot's 208, Renault's Clio, Volkswagen's Polo, and primarily Ford's Fiesta. This Vauxhall's predecessor relied heavily on dealer discounting to keep up with rivals such as these. This, its successor, must keep pace with them on sheer talent. Vauxhall has spent a long time ensuring that it can do exactly that, with this design's biggest weapon being an all-new 3-cylinder turbocharged 1-litre Ecotec petrol power plant that claims to bring a fresh level of sophistication to engines of this size. Sounds promising. So does the car. Let's put it to the test. There used to be quite a significant gap between a Vauxhall Corsa and its arch-rival Ford's Fiesta in terms of driving dynamics. There isn't any longer. Yes, of course, it still has a little way to go before it can surpass the Fiesta for ultimate handling response, but it can now run the Ford close, thanks to a whole series of development changes, not least a stiffer redesigned chassis and much greater torsional rigidity. Other reasons behind this improvement lie with a completely revised suspension setup. It features special front knuckles plus new spring rates and dampers to reduce the pitching movement that you'd normally get at the front during sharp braking manoeuvres. There's also much better body control and a significant improvement in ride quality. You wouldn't, though, notice that ride enhancement if you were to get yourself a Corsa fitted with the optional Sport chassis. Here you get stiffer springs and shock absorbers in a package you have to have if you upgrade your Corsa's standard 15 or 16-inch alloy wheels to a set of 17 inches. Now, I'll think very carefully before doing that. Unless you really are a budding Alonso, the standard supple comfort chassis really is the setup to have with this car. I'm tempted to be equally prescriptive when it comes to your choice of engine. At launch, the only completely new power plant this car could offer was the one on which the majority of the launch budget was clearly spent, the 3-cylinder 1-litre turbocharged Ecotec petrol unit. It's the one I'm trying here, and if I was shopping for a Corsa, this is the variant I'd ask to drive first. It comes in either 90 or 115 PS guises, and either way has the same claim to fame, namely in being the first 3-cylinder engine that, well, doesn't sound like a 3-cylinder engine. Unless you're familiar with power plants of this sort, then you probably won't know what I mean by that. If you are, then you'll know that they can be revvy, noisy, thrashy things. In an age where new generation Super Minis like this are supposed to be more comfortable, venturing beyond the metropolis, further afield over longer distances, those characteristics can be disappointing. You won't get them here though. This Ecotec unit is one of the very few on the market to be fitted with a balancer shaft, making it especially smooth, resonance-free, and a class benchmark for reduced noise, vibration and harshness. You simply wouldn't know that this car didn't have a more conventional four-cylinder layout. Not until you came to examine the impressively frugal running cost figures anyway. Though these can't quite match those of Ford's rival 1-litre turbo EcoBoost engine, they get very close, and Vauxhall reckons, probably rightly, that its quoted figures are more real-world achievable. Plus, as I've just suggested, they're delivered with much greater refinement. Switch from a Corsa 1-litre Ecotec into a directly competitive Fiesta 1-litre T EcoBoost, and under acceleration in the Ford, you'll really notice the extra din. Talking of acceleration, this car's respectably perky thanks to this power plant's 170 Nm of torque. As a result, this 90 PS variant can manage rest to 62 miles an hour in as little as 11.9 seconds, en route to a top speed that can be as much as 112 miles an hour. The pokier 115 PS version is capable of improving those figures to as much as 10.4 seconds and 121 miles an hour. Of course, there are other engine options, the headliner being a redeveloped version of the 1.4-litre turbo petrol unit that until now has been primarily reserved for Vauxhall's larger Astra family hatch. When offered with around 200 PS, it's the basis for the range-topping VXR hot hatch variant, but for mainstream Corsa models, it's available with 100 PS and a useful 200 Nm of torque, leading to performance figures that see 62 miles an hour from rest, achievable in 11 seconds dead, on the way to 115 miles an hour. So it's slightly slower than the pokiest 115 PS version of that 1-litre Ecotec engine, as well as being slightly less economic and slightly pricier. These factors could make ordinary 1.4-litre turbo petrol Corsa models a difficult sell. An easier Corsa variant for dealers to shift will be the 1.3-litre CDTI diesel. This engine's carried over from the previous generation model and is clearly set for a reasonable run in this Mark IV version, since the engineers have taken the trouble to upgrade it to Euro 6 emission status. As before, this frugal EcoFlex unit offers 75 and 95 PS output options. And as before, the one to have is the pokier version. This is not only down to the fact that the 95 PS model is of course faster. The rest to 62 mile an hour time is improved from 14.8 to 11.9 seconds, and the top speed rises from 102 to 113 miles an hour. It's also because, rather counterintuitively, it manages to be significantly less costly to run. Of course, diesel power and cutting-edge petrol engine technology can be pricey, which is why budget-minded Corsa folk shopping at the very bottom of the range will probably continue to opt for a version fitted with one of the two older 1.2i and 1.4i petrol power plants carried over from the previous Mark III model. Of this pair, the base 70 PS 1.2i unit really is for those who buy on price alone, with performance that'll see you take 16 seconds to reach 62 miles an hour on the way to 101 miles an hour. The 90 PS 1.4i variant improves those figures to 13.2 seconds and 109 miles an hour, and is the engine to choose if you fancy a Corsa without a clutch. Mated to it is the alternative of either a conventional 6-speed automatic gearbox or the much more affordable option of an improved version of Vauxhall's clever Easytronic transmission, which essentially gives you a normal manual gear stick you can operate without having to exercise your left foot. Both of these choices are really targeted at urban-based drivers, people who I'd imagine will particularly appreciate the much more sophisticated steering system fitted to this car. Following the current trend, it's been upgraded from old-tech hydraulic to new-tech electric status and given a speed-sensitive feature. That's not enough to enable this car to offer the kind of precise feedback you get in, say, a Ford Fiesta. But as standard with this system, you do get something which most owners will probably find a lot more useful, namely a clever city mode that makes low-speed manoeuvring and parking far simpler. It's smart in the city, just like this car. After a few days with this Corsa, I found the words of a familiar rhyme coming to mind. Something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. These are, after all, the fundamentals behind its design. The old is easily appreciated, for you'll immediately recognise this as a Corsa, given that the windows and the A, B and C pillars that surround them on this Mark IV model are pretty much identical to those of the old third generation version. There's much that's new too, though. Every body panel is different, most of the underpinnings are changed, and there's a redesigned crash structure at the front. All that does, though, surround much that's borrowed from the old Mark III. A number of the engines fitted to this car at launch were, after all, merely updated versions of those familiar from its predecessor. Some of them, though, are very different, like the environmentally blue 1-litre Ecotec petrol unit we're trying here. It's the cleverest power plant you can buy in this car, and there's also the option of a substantially revised version of Vauxhall's 1.4-litre turbo petrol unit. There's more, in other words, to this Mark IV model Corsa than meets the eye. And what meets your eye on first acquaintance are these eagle-eye-shaped headlamps, incorporating Vauxhall's signature wing-style LED daytime running lights. Between them is a low, sporty trapezoidal grille with a chrome bar for the Griffin badge that sits above front fog lamps embedded in chrome-trimmed air inlets that are intended to make the car look wider, lower and more purposeful. Which is certainly the profile demeanour of the three-door version, always supposed to be the sportier of the two Corsa body styles. That's further emphasised this time round by an upper window line that drops to the rear in an effort to make the car look coupe-like. Here, as you can see, I've got the slightly more conservative-looking five-door version, where the belt line extends upwards, creating a more dynamic connection with the roof spoiler. A nice touch is the way that these sculpted body sides feature the flowing Vauxhall blade signature that we first saw on the stylish Astra GTC Coupe. The rear view's been redefined too. Wide horizontal split tail lights with distinctive wing graphic design features help widen the car and flow through to the rear shoulders in a way that Vauxhall hopes will give this Corsa a more muscular stance. Lifting the tailgate reveals a reasonably sized boot, though you have to negotiate a fairly high loading lip in order to access it. In terms of size, it's pretty much the same as it was in the previous generation model. The 285-litre capacity, the same as you get in a Peugeot 208, a fraction less than you get in a Fiesta or Clio, and a fraction more than you get in a Volkswagen Polo. If you need more room than that, then pushing forward these seat backs frees up a reasonable 1,090 litres of space in the three-door variant, or 1,120 litres in this five-door model. Either way, though, the seat back doesn't fold down quite flat, and, rather meanly, only comes with a 60-40 split on plusher models like this one. If you're trying to transport a baby buggy, you may well have to take the wheel off before it will fit. There is, though, the useful option of a height-adjustable boot floor. Time to take a seat up front, where the differences that set this fourth-generation Corsa apart really do become obvious. Two first impressions dominate. First, that everything's of much higher quality than before, with soft-touch materials dominating the dash and decor elements dressed in rich satin chrome. Second is the way that on most models, many of the major functions are grouped onto the 7-inch IntelliLink infotainment colour touchscreen that dominates the centre of the dash and is smartly mounted in a high-gloss surround. We'll get to that first, a setup you might already be familiar with if you've tried it in Vauxhall's smaller Adam or larger Insignia models. It's one of the first to be able to communicate with both Apple and Android devices and applications, and is operable either via the touchscreen itself or through steering wheel switchgear. As you'd expect, IntelliLink deals with stereo and smartphone duties through the home page's phone and audio options, but it can go a lot further than that. Thanks to USB and Bluetooth connectivity, the gallery section can play your stored videos and show your personal pictures, while the apps section can link you in with approved apps like Stitcher, the global podcast internet radio system, and Bringo, a navigation app likely in future to make many extra-cost sat-nav systems redundant. If you've an Apple device to link in, you can also use the Siri Eyes-Free voice control feature that allows you to hear an incoming text read aloud or dictate texts and emails, all without taking your eyes off the road. Also designed to help you with your road ahead focus is the Driver Control Centre, a useful screen you'll find between the two main chrono-style dials on a now much clearer instrument panel. It's been themed around horizontal lines and is viewed through a smarter, more ergonomic three-spoke steering wheel. It all feels a big step forward from Corsas of old and is complemented by strong build quality from the Spanish Zaragoza factory. It's also built in Germany, so perhaps this solidity is to be expected. The driving position is quite good, aided by a steering wheel that's both reach and rake adjustable. Unfortunately, though, the height adjustable driver's seat I've got here isn't standard on the lower trim levels. Practicalities include a variety of cup holders and front doors featuring a compartment large enough for a 1.5 litre bottle. In the back, this Corsa is much as it always was, remaining one of the more spacious super minis you can buy, with plenty of room for 2 fully grown adults or 3 children in this 5-door model. Inevitably, the 3-door body shape is a little more claustrophobic. Either way, though, there's significantly more head and legroom than you get in a comparable Ford Fiesta. You've also got the useful option of being able to alter the angle of these rear backrests. Vauxhall's approach to pricing has changed somewhat with this 4th generation Corsa. Where previously the sticker figures left room for significant dealer discounting, these days the list prices are far sharper to begin with, several £1,000s lower than those of the old Mark III model in the case of some derivatives, and much closer to the final amount you'll actually spend. As is common with a modern Super Mini in this class, it is possible to pay up to around £16,000 for mainstream versions of this car, but Vauxhall has stolen a march on most of its volume brand rivals by giving the range a particularly low price starting point that can be as little as around £9,000. Looking at the lineup in detail, there's a £600 model-for-model premium if you want this 5-door body style rather than the 3-door variant. And the really clever turbo petrol 1-litre Ecotec variants that I'd recommend you try are priced from around the £11,000 mark. Diesel versions start from just over £13,000, but potential CDTI customers would do well to find the £600 premium necessary to progress from the 75 PS version to the significantly faster and more frugal 95 PS variant. If you don't want to have to exercise your clutch foot, then the 90 PS 1.4i model offers a couple of options. The Easytronic system, that for a £650 premium does away with the clutch, or for a £1,500 premium, a conventional 6-speed automatic gearbox. On to the value proposition all that represents. That low price entry point will save you anything between £700 and £3,000 over obvious rivals, and even supposedly price-sensitive brands like Seat and Skoda can't match it. The cheapest 1.25 litre 60 PS Fiesta you can buy is £1,000 more and offers feebler performance. I single that car out because it's the one most buyers are probably going to cross-shop against this Corsa, which is something your Vauxhall dealer might well encourage you to do, given that across the range, the Ford looks significantly more expensive. In rough terms, if you expect a Corsa to list for around £1,000 less than a directly comparable Fiesta, then you won't be too far out. I would point out, though, that when you pitch the clever, affordable 1-litre Ecotec petrol turbo versions of this Vauxhall against their directly comparable 1-litre T EcoBoost Fiesta counterparts, the difference is considerably greater than that. Look beyond Ford for super mini segment competition to this car, and of course, there's plenty. Bargain basement models like Dacia's Sandero and the MG3 would save you a little, but feel cheap and flimsy. Otherwise, by and large, this Vauxhall looks very good value indeed. The savings over, say, an equivalent Peugeot 208, Seat Ibiza, or Skoda Fabia might only amount to a few £100s, but the difference between this car and, say, a Renault Clio might easily be as much as £1,500. Go a step further and compare a Corsa against a Volkswagen Polo, and the model-for-model difference in the case of some variants could well be £2,000 or more. If, having considered all of this, you conclude that it is a Corsa that you really want, then you'll be needing to know just how generous Vauxhall has been with the standard spec. The answer is surprisingly so. The company is, for example, very proud of the fact that all variants get a Thermatec heated front windscreen, introduced as a result of biofeedback suggesting that the screen demister on the previous generation model was somewhat ineffectual. Personally, I'd have preferred, from base trim upwards, to see a 60/40 split-folding rear bench fitted and a proper space-saver rear wheel, rather than one of those fiddly tyre inflation kits. Still, these niggles apart, there's no doubt that the Griffin brand has largely specified this car very well. Most models do, after all, get things like LED daytime running lights, electric mirrors, powered front windows, remote central locking, and a decent quality stereo with an aux-in socket. Some affordable variants even get niceties like 16-inch alloy wheels, cruise control, and a leather-covered steering wheel with remote stereo controls too. Bear in mind that you have to stretch up to the mid-range trim levels to get the clever IntelliLink infotainment system I've been talking about, with its 7-inch colour touchscreen, plus Bluetooth and web functionality. Still, at least at this level, you also get niceties like front fog lights and auto headlamps and wipers. Further up the range, or on the options list, there are, as is the fashion in the super mini sector these days, plenty of big car features. Things like a panoramic glass roof, a heated steering wheel, climate control, bi-xenon headlamps with cornering lights that illuminate your way around the bends, a rear-view parking camera, and an advanced park assist self-parking system that'll help you identify a potential space, then automatically steer you into it. I'd also want the speed limiter function that'll help preserve your licence in urban areas or through roadworks. As for personalisation, well, there's nothing like the range of individualistic choices you get with Vauxhall's smaller Adam model, but you can select from various colours for the trim panel that stretches across the dash. On to safety kit. It's simply not acceptable for a modern Super Mini to these days be launched without twin front, side and curtain airbags plus stability control. Sure enough, all these essentials are fitted on even the humblest Corsa, along with ABS braking, of course, and a couple of extra features you might not expect. A tyre pressure monitoring system and hill start assist to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. Should you be in a smash, the steering column has special impact absorbers and has been redesigned with additional padding to better protect your legs. Options include a forward collision alert system that scans the road ahead for potential accidents. If one is detected, you'll be warned so that you can possibly avoid a potential collision. There's also the option of traffic sign recognition, which pictures traffic signs as you pass them and displays them on the dash. A blind spot alert feature to stop you dangerously pulling out to overtake in front of another driver. A following distance indication feature with a dash display that constantly shows how close you are to the vehicle in front. A high beam assist function that'll automatically dip your headlights at night in the face of oncoming traffic. And a lane departure warning system that'll stop dozy drivers from veering out of their lanes on the highway. The Corsa has long campaigned on its provision of low running costs, and this fourth generation version picks up here where its predecessor left off. The headline-making engine here is the 1 litre petrol turbo Ecotec engine that I'm trying. Now, some of the motoring media have suggested that it's some way off the pace of the rival Ford 1 litre T EcoBoost engine when it comes to efficiency. But in the case of the 90 PS version that almost everyone will buy, that's just not true. We're talking 65.7 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 100 grams per kilometre of CO2, which is pretty much identical to what you get from a directly comparable 100 PS Fiesta 1 litre T EcoBoost. Unfortunately, unlike Ford, Vauxhall hasn't found a way of significantly raising the output of this turbocharged three-cylinder engine without significantly affecting running costs. So, while you can graduate from 100 to 125 PS versions of Ford's EcoBoost unit with no change in fuel consumption or emissions, progressing from a Corsa with the 90 PS 1 litre Ecotec engine to one with a pokier 115 PS 1 litre Ecotec unit will see the fuel figure drop to 57.6 miles to the gallon and the CO2 return deteriorate to 114 grams per kilometre. Mind you, that's still better than any other petrol-powered Corsa model can manage. The remaining mainstream models may all have feebler power plants, but they can't stretch to Ecotec levels of cleanliness and frugality. You might think the least powerful 70 PS 1.2i entry-level variant would get close, but it delivers only 53.3 miles to the gallon and a very unremarkable 124 grams per kilometre of CO2. In the mainstream petrol range, that only leaves the 1.4 litre models with the 100 PS 1.4 turbo variant managing 55.4 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 119 grams per kilometre of CO2. Go for the other option, the normally aspirated 1.4i, and your returns will depend on the gearbox chosen. With a standard manual stick shift, the figures are 55.4 miles to the gallon and 119 grams per kilometre. You can improve that to 60.1 miles to the gallon and 112 grams per kilometre by choosing the clutchless Easytronic transmission, but the figures will inevitably deteriorate if you choose the full automatic model to 47.9 miles to the gallon and 139 grams per kilometre. Doing without a clutch is something urban-based folk will particularly appreciate. The same folk most likely to be drawn to the 1.3 litre CDTI EcoFlex diesel variants. The base 75 PS version of this engine manages 76.3 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 99 grams per kilometre of CO2. It's much better, though, to pay the small premium necessary to go for the 95 PS version of this unit. For that not only gives you more performance, but also improves efficiency. This derivative returning 88.3 miles to the gallon and an impressive 85 grams per kilometre of CO2. The result of all Vauxhall's engineering effort here is an impressive set of whole-life costs that are further aided by an improvement in residual values that could be as much as £1,000 over the standard 3-year, 100,000-mile ownership duration. Over that time, let's say you were to own a 95 PS Corsa SRI 1.3 CDTI diesel. Stack its running costs for that period over those you'd incur in comparably performing rival diesel super minis, and you'd save £655 over a Ford Fiesta, £1,547 over a Volkswagen Polo, and £1,669 over a Peugeot 208. Now those are significant chunks of money for super mini buyers. For company drivers, there are also useful benefit-in-kind savings to be made by running a Corsa rather than one of its super mini rivals. Taking the same 1.3 litre CDTI diesel SRI model as a benchmark over the same ownership period on a personal tax rate of 20%, this Vauxhall would net you a tax saving of £90 over a comparable Ford Fiesta, £129 over a comparable Volkswagen Polo, and £190 over a comparable Peugeot 208. So yes, this car adds up on the balance sheet. On to insurance groupings, which are significantly lower than those for this car's predecessor. Let's start with the petrol versions. For the base 1.2 litre model, you're looking at either Group 2E or 3E, while for the 1.4i it's Group 6E or 7E. For the 90 PS version of the 1 litre Ecotec unit I'm trying here, you'd be looking at Group 9E, while for the Pokia 115 PS version, you'd be talking between Groups 11E and 13E. The 1.4 turbo 100 PS model is rated at Group 10E. For the 1.3 CDTI 75 PS variant, you're looking at either Group 6E or 7E. For the 1.3 litre CDTI 95 PS variant, it's Group 9E. It's said that while the key to happiness is hard to define, the root of unhappiness is easy. It's trying to please all of the people all of the time. Yet that's exactly what the modern Super Mini needs to do. It's a virtually impossible task, and it's a tribute to the talent of the best of the current crop that they managed to do so much so well. The Corsa has long been a stalwart in this sector, but time and technology took their toll on the Mark III version. This fourth generation car, though, looks a very different proposition. At first glance, you might assume that the changes made amount to little more than a mere restyle of what went before, but there's much more to this Vauxhall than that. Here's a car that's been designed from a clean sheet of paper, with an enormous development budget behind it. That becomes obvious when you take a seat in the smarter cabin, when you interact with the clever IntelliLink infotainment system, and when you peruse the lengthy options list with its wide selection of luxury segment safety features. Most of all, it becomes obvious at the wheel of what is probably the engine of choice in this fourth generation version, the clever, efficient and class-leadingly refined 1 litre Ecotec turbo petrol power plant. With all these things in its armoury, this model is off to a promising start. Ultimately, what we're looking at here is a Corsa that can. It can be fun to drive, it can deliver a big car feel, and it can stack up well on the balance sheet. It's a small Vauxhall for which no apologies need to be made. All that will worry obvious Super Mini rivals. After all, this model's predecessor lacked a little in all of these areas, yet still racked up very respectable sales against them. This Mark IV version's still very competitively priced, but has become a contender in this segment that sells on more than just sheer value. It's not perfect, of course. It doesn't lead its class in terms of either space, efficiency or driving dynamics, and more work is still needed under the bonnet to deliver an engine range in which all the options are as good as the 1 litre Ecotec unit we've been trying here. The key, though, is that this Vauxhall is now there or thereabouts in the 3 key areas I've just mentioned. Add to that the wide model lineup and the likely deals on offer, and you've a Super Mini that more than ever needs to remain high on any family's shopping list.